Thanks for joining us tonight. I think you're going to like this one that we've got set up for you. If you thought working on a museum ship was easy or safe, tonight we're going to talk about an accident that happened on the USS Kidd about 12 years ago. Pretty excited to talk about this in a little bit of a weird way, but I think you all are going to like it. My name is Ken Stano with the YouTube channel History X. Tonight, it's another episode of Museum Ship Mafia. Got the guys with me. Upper right-hand corner, John Epp, USS Slater. Lower right-hand corner, Connor Kilgore, or with the Alexander Henry, the Transportation Museum of Thunder Bay. Lower left-hand corner, you've seen him here before. We've had him on many times. Tim Nesmith, Superintendent of the USS Kidd. Shane Stevenson will be popping on here soon from the Buffalo Naval Park. But like I said, tonight we're going to be talking about an incident or an accident that I've kind of been curious about, but finally asked Tim to join us tonight to talk about it. And I've got some photos here that I want to bring up. So if you've ever paid attention to the USS Kidd's Facebook page, I highly recommend it. They always post all kinds of great pictures. You've seen Tim do all kinds of things, from painting the hull, or in these pictures here, he's sanding something. Or I actually didn't know you guys had aircraft on the premises.
We've actually got two, a P-40 replica and an A-7 Corsair.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So you've seen him do all kinds of maintenance projects, but what you may not be aware of is back in 2012, there was an explosion on the Kidd. Is it okay to call it an explosion?
I call it an explosion.
All right, good. So that was back in May of 2012. They were firing the guns on the Kidd, and I also grabbed this screenshot. So was it Mount 52?
Mount 52, correct.
Okay, all right. So I got the right picture. And obviously, since I'm asking Tim these questions, Tim is the one that it happened to. Mount 52. So what was happening?
Well, we since the Kidd got here around 80, opened up in 83, they had been firing the guns, initially Mount 51 and Mount 52, for special events. Right after they opened up, the barracks bombing in Beirut occurred, and so every day they would at noon they would fire a shot in memory of one of the Marines that was killed.
Every day.
Other surfacemen, yeah. So that went on for a long time. And of course, I was still in high school or middle school at that point. So, yeah, we would fire it for Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Pearl Harbor Day, Armed Forces Day. On July 4th, which is what this still shot is from, the video from, we would have I hate to use the term reenactment because it's not really a reenactment of any particular thing, but they would get warbirds to fly in and make mock runs at the Kidd, basically flying. We're right next to the I-10 bridge, so they had to be very careful not to get too close, not to fly over the bridge, not to fly under the bridge. But they would make a little racetrack pattern. North of us, come around, make a quote unquote bombing run at us. And they would set off explosives out in the river, like they actually dropped bombs and they missed us. And that went on for years and years and years. And eventually we got Mount 54 up and running because it looked weird that the front end of the ship is firing, but the back end isn't as they're going away. So we got 54 up and running. Jesse Eves, our ship superintendent at that point in time, got it running. And we'd fire about 10 shots from each gun. They'd make about 3 or 4 passes, and we'd fire those off. And people loved it. It was fun, you know. You don't often see that sort of thing. So people got used to seeing the Kidd shooting its guns. And so on the day that I got hurt, we had a military reunion. That was the other big thing that we would do. For a while, in the 90s and really early 2000s, we at various times would pop into and pop out of the top 10 destinations for military reunions. in the country. And that was all these World War II vets. There's a lot more destroyers than there are, battleships or carriers or whatever during World War II. And so all those guys were flooding down to Baton Rouge at various times. We'd have about 30, 35 reunion groups come through a year. And inevitably, when they found out we could shoot the guns, they'd be like, "How much?" And, we charged them $20 a shot, something like that. And really didn't make any money off of it. That wasn't the point of it. They would come on board, and as you're looking at the ship right here in this picture, where the gangway comes onto the fantail, they would set up there with chairs and everything and a podium, and they'd have a memorial service for crew members that were lost during the war or crew members who had passed on since their last reunion. And at the end of the memorial service, we'd fire off 9 times out of 10, it'd be Mount 52. And just do a 3-shot salute. Every once in a while, they'd really want a 5-shot salute for each branch of the service, depending on what type of ship it was or group it was. Every once in a while, you'd get some gung-ho guy that would be like, "I need a 21-gun salute." And we're like, "No," because the mayor's office is right across the levee, and they're going to get upset after a while of us rattling their windows. So yeah, that's what we were doing that morning on May 1st, 2012. We had the Kenneth G. Whiting, which was a seaplane tender, and they were set up, and they had asked us to fire 3 shots.
And okay, so for those of you that aren't aware, the submarine, the USS Cod, they can fire their deck gun, but I think it's propane that they put into the barrel. What are you guys firing these guns with?
Black powder, triple F.
So it's pretty much the real thing then.
Yeah, we could only put in 1 pound of powder. Anything more would shatter windows downtown. And I don't know that they actually shattered windows downtown when they first tried it. I think somebody did the math who's a lot smarter than me as far as tensile strength on the glass and everything. But yeah, we never varied over a pound of powder.
And so that's exactly what you're doing. What was that? Was it in May?
May 1st.
Okay, that's exactly what you're doing. May 1st, which is, wait, hold on a second. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so this picture here.
Yes.
What happened to get you into this position? Because that's you that's on the stretcher there. You're being transported away. Correct. So on May 1st, what was happening?
Well, we got there. We set up for the reunion. Usually we would pack the powder casings, a day or 2 in advance. And my old office on the ship was Tim Rizzuto's old office, John's boss. And that was in the 40 millimeter ammo magazine. So it's a safe location. So we would we'd get the gun turned into place, move the powder casings over to the gun, and then lock up the gun until it was time for the reunion. And we would usually, if it's 3 shots, we'd have 4 packed just in case one was a dud, and a pail of water in case, we had a dud. We'd douse it just to be safe. And so we went through all that. The reunion comes on board and starts their ceremony. And myself and we always had 2 people in the gun minimum. Myself and my partner that day, our painter, ship's painter, Tracy Lewis, went to the gun. And essentially we sit there and wait. And when they get to the point to where they're ready for the gunfire, they call over the 1MC. And cell phones were really great because sometimes the 1MC would break down or we couldn't hear them, depending on who was talking. And so if the 1MC did not convey the message of Mount 52, fire at will, then they would ring our cell phone. So I had my cell phone in my left hand or my right hand pocket that day, which comes into play later on in the story. But yeah, we heard 1MC call. And so I was on, Tracy and I would trade up that morning. I was like, "You want to load or you want to cock?" And he's like, "I'll cock, you load." So took the powder casing, and if you've ever been inside a 5-inch gun, and I apologize, I should have taken a picture of the inside for the broadcast tonight, but it's basically shaped like an L. So if I'm on the open side of the L, I'm loading into the tray, and the cocking bar is on the tall side of the L. In the wrong area. There we go. Cocking bar is over here where Tracy was standing. I was in the open face of the gun. So load number one, hit the trigger, boom. Load number two, or Tracy ejects. I load number two, boom. He ejects. I load number three. And as I'm loading number three, I noticed kind of a golden flash, like dropping down. And the thing that went through my mind, and my hand is in motion at this point, pushing the thing over the breach, and it's too late to stop because there's two little hooks, tongs, I don't know the proper terminology for it, but when the edge of the powder casing hits those and moves them, then the breech, which is spring loaded, pops up and it moves your hand out of the way. That's why you never want to go from the bottom cupping it, because your fingers could conceivably, it'd be hard to do, but could conceivably get caught up in there in the mechanism. But if you've got your hand up and you're pushing it in, then if the breech comes up and you're not fast enough, it's just going to knock your hand up out of the way. And so it was too late for me to stop the motion of the powder casing. And the thought that had gone through my head, that little gold colored light, was the primer charge slipping out of the back of the shell. So the breech comes up, it's locked in, and I'm like, oh crap. And Tracy heard me. That's not a good thing to say inside a 5-inch gun. And he's like, what's wrong? And I said, the primer just fell out. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. So I've got a flashlight. I'm looking around on the deck underneath. I'm looking in the mechanism in the recoil area, further down the tray. I spent probably 30, 45 seconds looking for it. Couldn't find it. It's a small space. So, I did it a couple of times. Didn't find it anywhere. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, we can't fire this because there's no primer charge in it. So let's back this out, and I'm going to douse it, and we're going to grab the spare, put it in, and off we go.
Now, hold on a second. Let me interrupt you real quick. So were people waiting for you to fire this next shot? Were you
it's all part of a ceremony. Boom, boom, boom. Taps goes off. Amazing Grace, blah, blah,
so
blah.
You had already fired 2 shots.
2 shots.
They're waiting for the third.
Yes.
And this time is passing. Did you feel any pressure at all? Like, oh shoot, we got to get this third shot off.
Oh, I knew my boss was going to call and go, what the hell are you doing? But, hey, there's been instances where, we've had a mess up of somehow, something didn't work properly, something jammed, the breech jammed or something, and we just didn't get the third shot. And when we tell the reunion group, hey, sorry about that, but we had mechanical failure, mechanical difficulties, they're like, oh, hey, it's an old ship, just like us. We know. So, there's a little bit of pressure, but, it wasn't like, oh my God, I've got to get this done. So,
okay. All right. Sorry for interrupting.
No. That's a legitimate question. I get that question a lot when I tell the story, but, at this point, it's like, let's get this out safely, because I don't want, a powder charge just sitting there, and it's May, so it's hot as hell. I don't want that sucker cooking off, with somebody walking under the barrel, blow their eardrums out or anything. So I told them, I said, when we eject them, they don't come flying out like they did when they had 18 pounds of powder back in the day. They just kind of slide out. It's a little short round, maybe about a foot and a half long. And I told Tracy, I said, all right, I'm going to count to 3. You drop the bar, drop the breech. I'm going to catch this thing as it comes out, which it would just slide right back into my hand. And I'm going to lift it and put it in the bucket, which was right by my right leg. And he's like, okay. So I put my right hand out, because, of course, the ship is built for right-handed people. I couldn't have put my left hand out. And I said, all right, on 3. 1, 2. And then I said 3. And as I said 3, the cocking bar has a little curved hook that When you pull it back, it rides over this hook, and you hear a clicking sound. That's your little safety catch on the bar, so the bar just can't drop back and accidentally move the breech. And I hear the click as he pulls it over the safety catch, and then I hear like the sound of rushing wind, like I'm standing out in a hurricane, and there's this brilliant white light and the sound of, I always forget the name of it, the little sparklers like the little kids have on the 4th of July, that sound. And then it's over and it's black, and I'm blinking because I've kind of been, like brilliant white light and then darkness, and I'm like, what just happened? And as my vision clears, I'm not standing up anymore. I'm down on hands and knees on the deck of the gun, and I've got both of my hands in front of me, and everything is smoky. And you know how when pilots, when they have an like a crash or something of a airplane, they go and they pull the black box, and 9 times out of 10, it seems like the very last thing you hear is some expletive from the pilot or the co-pilot when they realize that I'm not going to pull it out.
Mm-hmm.
I dropped an F-bomb. I'm like, oh, F me. Because as my vision cleared, I can see my hands on the deck, and there's 5 fingers here and there's 2 fingers there. And
oh, wow. So, okay, even though it was smoky and everything, you could at least see that.
yeah, because I'm against this dark blue deck inside. So yeah, it was very visible. So at that point, it's like, okay, I can't claim any thought process behind this. This was just instinct, training, whatever you want to call it. But instinct was, there's been an accident, get out. So I picked my hand up and put it against my chest, my right hand, injured hand, and stood up and very carefully, because I can't tell when the smoke what has happened. There's still a live shell back there somewhere, and I can't tell where everything is. So I just slowly made my way by feel to the open hatch on the port side of the gun. So I was facing, actually, the way the gun was turned. If you throw that original picture back up, instead of facing toward the port side, the gun was facing really toward the screen, toward the starboard side. So my open hatch was the one you can't see. Mm-hmm. And that curve in the railing between the guns there, that's what I was facing when I got to the door, to the hatch to come out. You can't tell in this image here because it's too far away, but there's a handrail right on the corner of the gun, between the doorway and the corner of the gun. And then there's a 2-rung ladder beneath the door. And so when I got there, here's where some thinking started kicking in instead of just instinct. I'm like, okay, how the hell am I going to get out of this? Because I've only got one hand to operate with, and I've got a railing right there. If I do this wrong, I'm going to bounce off the railing and land on the deck down below, like 1 level down on the main deck. That's going to hurt. So I fiddled around a little bit and tried to go out frontwise and have my hand on the handrail, but that just wasn't going to work. So I turned around and went backwards like we normally do. I had my hand on the door frame, and I realized I'm not that tall, so I'm only 5'6", so I'm not going to make it with my arm extended all the way up where I'm holding now. So I grabbed real low and stepped out onto the rail, stepped down to the next rail, and then I had to, you can see how high it sits up above the deck. I had to just step on down. And so I had it as low as I could go, and right hand is still on the chest. And when I stepped, it felt like I was going down for, you know how stuff happens when you're in an accident, your adrenaline's going, everything, time just stretches out. It felt like I was dropping for like 6 years. And finally, I hit the deck with my feet, but I had momentum, and I don't have anything on my right side to stop me. And so I swung around, and I just banged right into the bulkhead of the gun. But I didn't fall over the rail and fall to the next level down, so that was good.
Okay, now wait, hold on a second. I want to make sure I've got. So this ladder, yeah. You're talking about going down this ladder that we see underneath.
No. No, you can't see. I'm talking about the two. I'm pointing at the screen.
Yeah,
Nobody.
yeah.
There's two little foot rungs below the open hatch on the gun.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
you can't
you're not talking about going down that housing that's under the mount. You're just talking about trying to get out of the mount.
get out of the mount on the same level that the gun's on.
Oh, okay. All
But
right.
I'm trying to do it in a way because I'm pointing at the screen again. I got to put my hand in my pocket. Sorry.
Well, that's all right. I do it too. I'm motioning with the mouse and everything, and you guys can't see what I'm doing with the
Right,
mouse.
right. I'm
Right
trying
there,
not
guys. Right
to.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying not to with momentum because I don't have anything really to stop me from hitting that rail and rolling over that rail and dropping to the main deck down below.
hmm
Because it was very close. When the gun is turned almost all the way to starboard, that hatch is right above that netting. So.
Okay. And then so basically what you're saying is you felt like you were trapped in slow motion. You said it took like 6 years.
Oh yeah, it seemed just to go forever.
Uh-huh.
But that's just adrenaline, you know.
Were your
athletes talk about that too?
Were your ears ringing? Were your eyes like stinging from the smoke? You know, I mean, what was that like?
I really don't have any recollection of ringing in my ears. I don't remember because I was keeping my eyes kind of squinted because of the smoke and everything. And once I got out of the gun, then like I said, thought processes started kicking in at that point, and it's like when I got into the sunlight, if you've had a really bad sunburn and you get into direct sunlight, it feels kind of like insects are crawling on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because it's just reacting, the burns are reacting to the sunlight, and I felt that on my face, and so I'm like, okay, my face is burned. So what do I do about my eyes? Are my eyes damaged? I can see, but should I close my eyes? Should I keep them open? What the hell do I do? So I erred on the side of caution. I just kind of closed my eyes, just kind of squinted to where I could just see through the eyelashes a little bit. And that's after I'm outside the gun. And I started making my way around the gun to basically get to the ladder, not this ladder that you see in the picture, but back by the deck house, by the breakwater, to come down to the main deck. And I got a little dizzy there for a second, so I just kind of knelt down on the deck and I dropped my hand off of my chest and just put it down on the deck along with my left hand to balance myself for a second, take a moment. And right about then, I heard footsteps thumping, and through my squinted eyes, I saw Tracy's boots. He had bailed out the other side of the gun, and his boots stopped right in front of me, and he said something to me. I don't remember the exact words. Probably knowing Tracy, was like, "I got you, brother," or something like that. And I see a blue shirt land on my injured hand, and he's like, "Wrap that up, Tim. Wrap that up." And so I bundled it up. He had pulled his shirt off so he could, bind up my hand. And he's like, "I'm gonna go get the EMS. I'm gonna go get them so they can bring their stuff up here." I said, "No." I said, "I can walk. Let's just get to the ladder." I said, we had a welding project going on. I said, "The welders are at the bottom of the ladder waiting for all this to be over. Between all of y'all can get me down the ladder, and I can sit down there at the kamikaze site. There's a hatch going to the forward fire room." And I said, I don't want them moving me down the ladder in a stretcher because they'll drop me. And I don't know why I felt they would drop me. They're professionals, but that was just what was in my head right then. Mm-hmm. And so he got me to the ladder, and one of the welders was there. He's like, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "You come up, put your hand, in my chest. If I tilt too far forward, stop me. Tracy's going to have my shirt. If I go too far backwards, if I go too far forwards, he's going to help stop me." I said, "If you see me going too far back, just make sure I don't slide and, hit you and keep sliding." So we just took it a step at a time, got down, and I sat down on the hatch. And by that point, I hear the sirens from the fire department. We got a fire station about 5 blocks up the street from us. So very quick response time. We actually had a tour group of elementary students on the levee, sitting on the steps, waiting for the reunion to end so they could come take a tour. And one of my college friends' wife was in the group, unknown to me, and she said they were watching the shoot because they love watching the gun shoot. The kids do. And she said, we saw one shot go out, we saw two shots go out, and then the third shot went out the sides of the gun. And immediately, those of us who are first responders jumped up and told the rest of them, watch the kids. And they raced on board. So they got to me before the fire department did, but the fire department wasn't. Somebody in the group called 911 and notified them. So I would say 2 minutes after I got down on deck, the people were around me, and the fire department was already en route. Very quick response time.
Well, okay, I got another question.
Yeah.
So what happened to, or did anything happen to Tracy?
Tracy was kind of protected by that tall side of the gun. He got singed on his hair. But so far as he ever told me, he didn't have any burns or anything, just his hair got singed. I will say, while it did affect him briefly for a while, but not physically, while I was sitting there, the fire department came up, all these people are around and everything, and one of our tour guides, Amy Ladley, from St. Louis, I kept hearing, because I've got my eyes closed, protecting the eyeballs, right? And I hear her voice moving to different compass points, up above me, down to the side, all around. And every 5 minutes or so, she'd be like, it seemed like 5 minutes. It may have been that tunnel vision thing. But she's like, I'm here, Tim, if you need anything. I'm here, Tim, if you need anything. Sweetest girl in the world. And at one point, I hear Tracy Doppler effect, and it's just like he's just lamenting. Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Tim, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And he's just going back and forth and around and down and above and everything. And finally, she said something again. And I said, Amy, what's Tracy doing? And she's like, he's moving around. I said, is he hurt? And she's like, no. I said, then he's gonna get hurt. He sounds hysterical. I said, get him and take him to the chief's mess and sit on him until somebody can look at him and examine him. And so she's like, I'm on it. And she took off. And I mean, it seemed like a couple of minutes, and then his voice stops, he disappears, and I don't hear him anymore. I kept asking for two of my coworkers that were back with the reunion group. One of them was a nurse, and they finally got her up there. Former nurse, retired nurse. I've made Connor sick. Sorry, Connor.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So Mary Fish comes up. I hear her, and she was in the Army. Then she became a nurse. She was a flight attendant. She's one of these people that's worked in everything. And so I wanted her for her medical background and for her military background in this instance. And she's like, Tim, I'm here. What do you need? I said, I need you to grab a fireman. She's like, okay. I said, I need you to go to Mount 52. There's still one live shell. I had seen the live shell sitting in the box, the crate that we would carry it in, wooden crate, carpeted. I said, I need you to get that shell, and I need you to take it back to my office, lock it up in the office. That way nobody gets hurt if they go, looking around in the gun for after action reports. And she's like, okay. And I said, and I need you to find my fingers and give it to the paramedics. And she hadn't seen my hand at that point. The fireman had come up at one point before this, and I had told one of the young welders when I got seated, he said, what can I do for you? I said, I need you to grab hold of my shoulder, put your thumb in my armpit. And this is a big, beefy boy. He had huge hands. I said, I need you to wrap your fingers on top of my shoulder, and I need you to squeeze down like you're trying to rip my arm off. And he's like, okay. And he did it. And I said, no, you got to do harder than that. And so he squeezed harder. I said, harder, come on, be a man. And so he put some force on it. And he's like that? I said, yeah. He said, what am I doing? I said, you're keeping me from bleeding out. And he's like, okay, because I've got my eyes closed. I don't know what's happening with my hand. And that was my first thought. And so the firemen eventually get there, and I hear this.
What were you trying to have him do? Pinch off your brachial?
Huh?
What were we trying to have him do? Pinch off your brachial artery?
If that's what it's called. Yeah, the artery going to the arm.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So, because I've always been trained in first aid classes that tourniquets are bad. Tourniquets are bad. So I was like, okay, well, this, he can release and grip, release and grip.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear a fireman get there, and he's like, what are you doing, son? He's like, I don't know. He told me to squeeze his shoulder like I'm trying to rip his arm off. And so the voice was up above me, and then I hear the voice kind of lower down to my level. And he's like, he tapped me on my knee, and he said, son, why do you have him doing that? And I told him, I said, I've always been told tourniquets are bad. I said, I don't want to bleed out, but at the same time, I don't want to cut off blood flow to, damage the arm. And he said, no, that's a good idea. He said, but we don't have to worry about that. You can let him go, son. And the welder let go of me. He said, and he tapped my knee again because he saw I had my eyes closed. And he said, your hand is cauterized. He said, you're not going to bleed out. I'm like, okay.
No kidding.
And then he is talking to me, asking me questions and everything. And I asked him, I said, so what do I do? I said, my face is burned, right? He said, yep. I said, so what do I do about my eyes? Do I open them? Do I close them? What do you want me to do? He said, why do you have them closed? I said, because I don't know what to do with my eyes if my face is burnt. And I said, I erred on the side of caution. You can always reopen my eyelids, right? And he laughed. He said, yeah, that's true. He said, you can leave them closed. You can open them. It doesn't matter. I said, well, I'll probably just leave them closed. He's like, okay. So they're all doing this stuff. He had moved my hand down to my knee at that point. He asked if he could move it. I'm like, yeah, sure. So he put it where he needed to work on it. And that's when Mary came up, and then she saw my hand for the first time after I said I needed to get my fingers. And she's like, oh my God. And she's like, we're on it. And off they went. I have to say, my staff that I was working with at that point, my coworkers, really stepped up. We'd never had a crisis like this before since I'd worked there. And they stepped up and they handled it immaculately. We had we're a non-funded state agency, so our insurance provider through the state, of course, did an investigation. And he told me later on, he said, your guys did great. He said, they were fabulous. He said, you've just done a great job with the safety program. Kudos to everybody that was there. So they did great. At that point, they said, we're going to load you up. And we actually did a video of this. Ryan and Libby did something on New Jersey's channel last January 23, where they blindfolded Ryan and talking about positional awareness and let him find his way from somewhere down in the bowels of the ship and move up to the main deck. And so I talked to him and I said, you guys did a great job. I said, that's exactly, the same sort of thing I went through with my accident. And I told him, about what aspect of it. And he said, you need to do a video. You've got practical experience. So we did a video. You can go to our YouTube channel and see it. It's called Positional Awareness. And
is that the one where it's like pitch black and you're trying to?
Yeah, basically.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
You've seen that one? Yeah. So yeah, we mimicked it with a camera and some filmy material over the lens. So basically you see light or you see dark, one of the two. And in that way, I was able to track my movement off the ship when they loaded me up and took me off. And I honestly surprised myself with knowing where I was on the ship, because they loaded me up and they're like, let's go. And they take off and I'm in the bright light. It's about, by this point, probably 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. Sun's well up and it's May. And so it's bright, and then all of a sudden it goes dark, and then it's light again. And it wasn't just a hazy, kind of gray dark. It was black dark. And I'm like, oh, I just passed under the 40 millimeters. And we're going along, and they shifted me hard to one side. And I'm like, okay, that's the 20 millimeters. And then there's this little kind of shadow that I went through, and it's like, okay, that's the life raft. And then they kind of stopped and they're kind of easing me around something. I'm like, okay, that's the hatch next to the depth charge track. And not saying it, I'm just thinking it because I'm laying there doing nothing, right? I got nothing to do now. And then there's that awning that's at our quarterdeck, and that was dark again. I'm like, okay, I'm under the awning. And then there's a bump and then and you're going up the gangway. Just it's a graded gangway, metal, aluminum. And then we hit smooth concrete. Yeah, that one there.
Oh, wait.
It's smooth concrete coming out of that gate in this picture. And I'm lost because I got no shadows. I got no sounds. So I'm waiting to go under our observation tower because there's a very sharply angled plate, lap plate that where the two pieces of concrete don't perfectly match. And so it's a jolt when you're rolling a cart or something over it. So I'm waiting for that. And we stop and the lap plate never happened. And I'm like, where am I? And I crack my eyes open and there's red and white up above me. And it's the drop tanks for the A7 jet. And in that other picture that you showed of me going down the levee, that sucker had positive traction. I was leveled out. I never even knew I was going down a levee. So they got me down the levee without me knowing it. They tricked me and loaded me up in the ambulance and off we go.
So if you guys are just tuning in right now, we've been talking to Tim Nesmith. If you're not aware, he was involved in an accidental explosion on the USS Kidd. I guess now it's 12 years ago, right?
Almost 12 years ago.
Yeah. And I started the broadcast out by saying if you thought working on a museum ship, wouldn't be dangerous or anything along those lines, it was May 1st, 12 years ago, that the third shot just went wrong. And that's what Tim's describing. So I've been asking all the questions. John, Connor, or Shane, what questions do you have for Tim so far?
I don't want to one up Tim, but I did cut my finger today at the ship.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How did that go?
Got a band-aid.
Okay.
Shane, Connor, you guys got anything?
Worst injury I've ever suffered aboard the ship is probably like, I don't know, I poked myself once in the wrist. No, my question was, had anything like this happened before, to your knowledge, in the museum fleet? Or, yeah, because I'm not sure if anyone had ever experienced this before or not. And the other question was, did this bring an end to you guys firing the guns on Kidd?
As far as if it happened in the museum fleet, I can't answer that. I don't know. I've never heard of it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I do know that some reenactment groups, like Civil War reenactment groups with the cannons, that has happened. In fact, I found out from the state trooper that ended up investigating, a couple of different investigations behind this. The state police had to do an investigation. All the alphabet agencies, when this accident happened, immediately perked up and went, who's been watching these guys? Who's in charge of monitoring these guys? And the fingers started pointing. You had ATF, you had state police, you had Coast Guard, back and forth. And, as they started going back around handyman, I like that, Dave. Thank you. It's a new one. I haven't heard that one. Seriously, I haven't heard that one. As they whittled it down to whose responsibility, whose jurisdiction it was, it fell to Louisiana State Police. And he told me while he was interviewing me at one point that probably less than a week after my accident, over in Lake Charles across the state, they have something called Contraband Days. It's a weekend-long festival. And they had some Civil War reenactors, and they were firing off their smoothbore cannon. And unfortunately, a couple of them had been imbibing, which was against the rules, and they admitted it. And one guy went to do the rammer, or not the rammer, but the I don't remember the name of it. It's the fuzzy ended rammer that cleans out the cinders. It's wet.
The swab.
Swab. Thank you.
Yeah.
The swab. And he went too soon because he was feeling the effects of the alcohol and his timing was off. And they fired it right as he put his hand in the way and with that swab. And he got the exact same injury that I did.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Wow.
So it's when you're messing with these old weapons, it can happen. Tim Rizzuto, in fact, told me, he called me in the hospital and was talking to me about it, and I described the accident to him, just like I did to you guys. And he told me about a similar incident during those Beirut shots that they were doing to honor the Marines. And he had a similar misfire, but his did not go off like mine. Mine was kind of a perfect storm. But he said, he looked down, saw a little bit of smoke from his, and he threw it out the door and into the river and doused it that way. So Tim came very close. There's folks that probably have come close over the years, but in my instance, the little flash of gold that I saw that I thought was the primer, I now believe was actually reflection from one of the passing tugs reflecting off the backside of my eyeglasses and passing, and therefore it's going down. And I say that because I've had that happen a couple of times working on the ship, and I see this gold flash, and I'm like, whoa. And I'm looking around, and the only thing behind me that's reflective, that's light emitting, is the glare off of one of these tugs' pilot house windows. So that's my theory for that. But it worked, like I said, like a perfect storm, because if I had not seen that light going down and thought that the primer had fallen out, then I would have hit the trigger and the gun would have gone off or nothing would have happened. Ultimately, we know that nothing would have happened, because that's the first crucial point there, is I didn't hit the trigger. The second crucial point is the trigger actually, or the firing pin actually did go off. When you're working these 5-inch guns, as they get wear and tear on the firing pin, it can develop a little vibration on its own. And by vibrating, the end of the pin is just almost touching, when the breech comes up, it's almost touching already the primer charge. And so that least little bit of vibration can set it off early. And usually if we loaded one and the breech comes up and boom, and we aren't anywhere near the trigger, then it's time to go ahead and pull the firing pin and put a new one in, service it, make sure everything's on the up and up. And I've talked to some of the crews, Fletcher crews, who've been through their gunner's mates, and they've said, yeah, if it's going off without you pushing a trigger, yeah, it's time to change firing pins. So that actually went off. The firing pin vibrated apparently, and the primer charge actually, when they looked later in the investigation, it had a nice little dimple in it, and it had gone off. So then why didn't the charge go off? That's the third thing. The third thing that lined up with these other two is that one of two things happened. Either the primer charge that we got, which was what they use in the movies, it's a prop for prop gun. It's just a little 45 cartridge that has a blanked off end, and it's meant for sticking into a 45 and firing, and it makes a bang, and that's it. That's what we were using for the primers. And either that was mismanufactured and had a little too much oomph to it, or when I packed the shells for that particular event, I packed that particular powder casing a little too tight, because what ended up happening, it blew through the packet instead of igniting the packet, blowing up inside the packet and then igniting it. So one of those two things happened. So if one of those three hadn't happened, the accident wouldn't happen. Because if the breech comes up and I think the primer charge is still in there, I would have hit the trigger. If I had hit the trigger and that firing pin had already set off the primer charge, then nothing would have happened, and we would have gone, whoa, something's wrong, and we would have stopped and shut it down. If I had thought that if you take that out, then if the primer charge had not blown through the packet, then it would have ignited it, and boom, we have no problem. So you take away any one of those three, and nothing happens. So it was meant to be.
All right, we're gonna show some of the other photos that Tim sent. This is him all smiles. How many
That's a
days
week
after
later.
I was just gonna ask, how many days later?
That's a week later.
Okay, so you're looking good. You know, obviously missing a few things.
Yeah.
But if anyone has a problem with burn photos, look away, because this is Tim.
That's about 2 or 3 days after I got there. It was a Tuesday.
That's 2 or 3 days? I thought that would have been 2 or 3 hours.
No. I want to say and this is where I will confess, I was on a lot of drugs, and my sense of the first week, like I got there on a Tuesday, and of course I was unconscious. The minute I got into the ER, they tubed me, and because they were afraid I might have breathed in fire, and thus, I might have had swelling and wouldn't be able to breathe. So they went ahead and tubed me immediately, and then took me to the operating room. But I woke up very briefly that night. They let me wake up, and of course couldn't talk because I had a tube down my throat, which was very freaky, I will say. There was a moment of panic, and then they explained what's going on, and they're like, just breathe. And I started trying to ask questions and can't talk, and so I'm trying to write in the air, and so the nurse was like, here's a pen and a paper. So they showed me the paper. We kept the paper, and I don't know how my wife and my 2 friends that were there in the room with her understood what I was doing, but I asked 3 questions. I asked about my stepson, Griffin. I asked if he was okay. I asked if Tracy was okay. And then I asked, because my wife is there, and obviously Thomas passed, and I'm like, where are the dogs? And after that, they said I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. So their answers were good. I was satisfied. But that was before Friday. I know that because my memory is kind of solid from Friday on. So that was either Wednesday or Thursday. I would hazard a guess it's probably Thursday, because you can see I don't have hair. They've shaved my head.
Okay.
And the shaving of the head, probably my wife was there for that. So probably that was Wednesday. They had to shave my head, and then they had to shave my face, and it was with a cheap Bic razor. And that was the most uncomfortable shave I've ever had in my life, and probably ever will.
Well, I would imagine, because these were considered 3rd-degree burns.
No, I was very fortunate. All I had were 1st degree and what they call 2nd degree deep. And what they described to me for 2nd degree deep was I fall asleep on the beach all day and sunburn.
Really?
Yeah. So all that shiny stuff that you see on my face in that photo, that's not like pus or bodily fluids. That's what they call sylvadine.
Okay.
And it's like an ointment, and they just coated my arms, my throat and neck, kind of down where the shirt line comes for a t-shirt, excuse me, and on my head and my face and everything, just coated it with it for probably about a week, maybe a little over a week. So yeah, by the time the other picture in the blue pops up, I've already peeled off like a snake.
Yeah, I mean, the recovery
is really peaked there, so it's brand new skin.
Well, it's remarkable, because I mean, if the burn photo was, what did you say, 2 to 3 days later after the explosion, then you're talking about a week later.
Yeah.
Here you are. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that's not even my glasses. That's something they cobbled together from my last prescription because I got my glasses I was wearing back later, and they were as dark as Shane's jacket there that he's wearing. They were just gone.
So when you're in the hospital,
Mhm.
what are you thinking? It's like are you right-handed?
No, I've always been left-handed. That's the other most popular question people hit me with is what hand was I left-handed or right-handed? And my boss even hit me with that. He's like, are you left-handed or right-handed? I said left. He's like, well, that's fortune. I said, fortune has nothing to do with it. The ship is designed for right-handed people. You know, that's the way things were back then. So, and still today, I'm sure.
Now you provided a whole bunch of other pictures, which I think I proceeded to jumble up in the wrong order.
That's all right.
So, you know, as I'm going through these pictures, and for those of you that aren't aware, you know, Tim sent me a whole bunch of pictures. I upload them, you know, I organize them and then I upload them for, you know, the live broadcast. So I'm looking at these things, and obviously this picture here shocks the hell out of me, you know, but then I'm looking at this. It's like, so did you have to learn how to use your hand all over again?
Pretty much. The having, if you can scroll back to the one that shows the hand up and all bound up and everything.
Oh, sure. Hold on a second.
Basically the arm is immobilized while they're doing surgery. And what they ended up doing, there is and Shane can attest to this from Sullivan's, there is basically a little small tabletop, a workbench mounted on the inner wall of the gun right next to where you'd be loading it. So you've got your tools there and everything. And my arm, when I was sitting there, I opened my eyes at one point because my arm was hurting. I'm like, why is my arm hurting? And he's like, you got it broken, son. And so I opened my eyes, and if I'm bending my wrist like this, imagine this bend right here going back here and being that severe. I shattered both of these bones. And my theory is where I was standing when the powder casing hit it, I rotated and hit the corner of that table right there and shattered both bones. And I do have a hook, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, he does have a hook.
Dave hits with the good questions. Dave's good. So both of these bones are shattered, and I think that's why I had the burns in the areas that I had, because it rotated me. And as the as the powder casing left, it's flying like a bottle rocket. I catch, for lack of a better word, I catch the jet wash for just a fraction of a second, and it cooks me. And then it hit the spade on. I should have taken a picture of this too. It hit the rammer on the back end of the gun and snapped it right off, ricocheted up, hit the gun captain's hatch, warped it, and then came down and hit the hot shellman's hatch, where he ejects the spent powder casings, and broke the hinge on that, and then it's expended all of its energy. So it was ricocheting around in there. We could have been injured a dozen different ways. God was with us that day. But yeah, the whole reason relearning to do everything is the wrist is immobilized. I've got 8 pins in the pinky, 2 pins in the thumb. They're not moving. And then I'm bound up so much that my elbow really isn't moving that much either. And I'm like that for the 18 days that I was in the hospital, in the burn unit.
18 days.
18 days. Now, part of that, I will say, Dr. Menser, my burn, Dr. Menser and Dr. Littleton, my burn doctors, who ran the unit, and some of them are watching tonight, from what I understand.
Did you? You gave me a couple of pictures. Are they?
These are my OTs and PTs.
Oh, okay.
That is the lady in blue there. Dawn was my occupational therapist. She's the one that tortured me on a 3-day-a-week basis.
I thought you might have had in the group that you sent me had pictures of your doctor. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. They didn't have time to take pictures in the burn unit. As bad as my injuries might sound, I was the least injured on the burn unit. They have two. I say have. They've moved the burn unit to a different location since I was in there. But that original burn unit, they had an entire half a floor of the building, and they had, out of all those rooms, they had 2 rooms that were set aside as their own personal ICU, out of, separate and distinct from the main hospital ICU. And that's where I lived for the Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. When I got up of that first week, they're like, okay, go down to the shower room. I'm like, you're walking today. I'm like, where's the shower room? And they're like, you've been there all this week. I'm like, I have no memory of this. I have a faint memory of them bathing me. And I'm laying in a prone position. And what I found out they did, they were rolling my bed. They just, take the wheels, unhook everything, roll me down the hall, roll me in, and then with the sheets, lift me over into this stainless steel tub and wash me down. And I remember it because she patted me with a terry cloth towel, or she rubbed with a terry cloth towel, and my voice went higher than Mariah Carey. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And she started patting, and that was fine. She could pat me all day long. It wouldn't do anything. But that was after 2 shots of morphine that she rubbed, and I out octaved Mariah Carey. But yeah, these people in the burn unit, fabulous people. When I got out Friday and moved into the normal room right next door, a lady came in later that night from a kitchen fire, and grease splattered apparently and set her apron on fire. And apparently it was not a fire retardant type material, and it just went straight up her body. And I never saw her, but did immense damage. She was in immense pain, moaning. And I asked my nurse, I said, can't y'all give her something for that? He said, son, she's knocked out. She is deep in sleep. He said, and she's in that much pain.
Wow.
So these people that I'm talking about in the burn unit are complete and utter angels. And I found out later, a lot of them have to rotate every couple of years. Like they'll move to wound care, or they'll move to the ER, because working in the burn unit is really intense. So Danielle Bennett gave me some pictures. I reached out to her before we did this, and I said, do you have any pictures of me? I was thinking x-rays. So do you have any pictures of my injuries or anything that's still in my file? And she's like, let me see if I can find them. And she sent me some, and I'm like, these are not good for the internet, because looked at, I'd never seen these before. And my nurse from the first night that I was there, his name was John. My nurse mistook me. He was there Tuesday night, gone Wednesday, Thursday for his weekend, came back on Friday morning, and he mistook me. He didn't recognize me because all the Silvadine had been pulling the black powder out of my pores over that time, and they're washing me and putting more Silvadine, and the swelling's going down, so it's exuding stuff more. And he walked in and said, who's in number 19? And they're like, oh, that's Nesmith. And he's like, that's not Nesmith. I took care of him on Tuesday. They're like, John, that's Nesmith. And they went back and forth and got in an argument. They're like, John, just go across the hall. And he's like, fine. And he walked over and he knocked on the door, and he's like, Mr. Nesmith? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God, I thought you were black.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he thought I was African-American, and he wasn't the only one. The physical therapist there in the unit that was with me for those 18 days, she saw pictures, and she thought I was black. And it was because of all the black powder. So Danielle sending me these pictures for this that I chose not to use. I'm completely gray. Completely as gray as the Slater is there behind John. And I had never seen it. I didn't even show him to my wife. I told my wife, I said, I look like a corpse. How pale and dark a corpse gets. I said, I'm not going to show these to you. These will upset you. But that's how much soot and black powder and everything was caked in my pores. So
what? So is this shortly afterwards, or is this something?
this is after, these pictures here are after my PT. So I got out on May 19th, and around June 1st, June 2nd, I started physical therapy, restoring the motion to the thumb and the pinky and the wrist and the elbow and everything. I couldn't supinate. I didn't even know what supinate was, which is basically I'm holding my arm this way and turning like that, supinating and protonating, or whatever it's called. I couldn't rotate my arm. It was locked in this position.
Okay.
So that was one of the big things of getting that back. And I did therapy with them from first week of June until the end of November. And so partway through, I want to say maybe 3/4 of the way through physical therapy, occupational therapy, which is what I was moving little marbles, I was picking up coins, I was picking up those pins that you showed me. And right at the end, Dawn got very sadistic. I love her to death, but she got very sadistic, and she gave me a little rubber ball and a trampoline stood up on its side, and I had to bounce the ball off of the trampoline and catch it with my right hand. And I got a ball in my face multiple times. So working with straps, pulling straps with this arm and everything. So about 3/4 of the way through, she hooked me. She started talking to me about prosthetics. She said, you're going to need to talk to a prostheticist, whatever the proper name is, a prosthetics guy. And we'll get you fitted up with one. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't even think about that. So they brought a couple of different companies in with me. Ultimately, I chose Hanger Prosthetics, partly because they've been around since right after the Civil War. Old Man Hanger was a Confederate veteran in the First Battle of Manassas, and the Union shot a cannon into the barn that he was hiding in with some of the other Confederate troops that they were sniping from. And the cannonball came in, bounced, and took his leg off below the knee. And the government after the war was giving Union veterans and Confederate veterans, wooden legs, and they sucked. And so Hanger took and designed his own, and the government liked it so much. It was so much better. Other veterans were raving about it, that he would make them one. So he patented it, and then the government paid him to make lower leg prosthesis. So I'm like, it's been around 100 years. Plus 100 plus years. And if it's good enough for a vet, it's good enough for me. So these guys fashioned the hook that you saw earlier. And then this is my current prosthetic.
Wait, hold on a second. So you're talking about, are you talking about this?
That's a titanium hook. It's held onto my hand. It's molded. They took and molded my arm and my hand. So it's custom made for me. Nobody else can wear it comfortably. It's held on with just a cinch and Velcro. Excuse me. And if I've got something that just needs to hook on and walk, I hook onto a suitcase, I hook onto a bucket, and I walk with it. It's very simplistic. I do have to watch that I don't go to Florida with it, because apparently somebody with something similar was in an attempted mugging, and he's right-handed, and he threw a punch and caved in the guy's temple and killed him, the assailant. And he got put on trial for attempted manslaughter, if you can believe that. So I do not wear a hook when I go to Florida. Okay. That is my first, what I call robo hand. It's from Touch Bionics out of Ohio. And it was a touch pad. So I would flex my knuckle on my pinky and then flex my index finger knuckle to close it. And it never worked right. And the sleeve is the battery pack for it. And it would I'd slide in and zip up. So that's the one that, I think that's the one that, no, that's not the one I'm choking Rizzuto with. That's my original. it didn't work right. There was, I want to say, a production run of about 13 of them, and mine was the only one that didn't work. So they flew me to Columbus, Ohio to see why. And every other one had been set up with this myoelectric system to where it reads the electrical impulses that are going through the nerves in your hand. And that's apparently the way to go. The touchpads suck. So they did the new one with the little bracelet for the battery pack. And that's myoelectric, and I've had that ever since. And it just works fabulous.
And that is, where the heck was it? That's this guy?
That's that guy.
Okay.
That is RoboHand.
Sorry.
I named them.
Got these a little out of order. And then you had mentioned, so that's the same one, right?
That's the same one. That's the last one that I got. And I've actually broken it. Each one of those fingers has 50 pounds of pressure. It can take 50 pounds of pressure. And we were moving houses, and I lifted a box of books. I thought I had loaded lightly, and I didn't. It was overloaded. And I hear a snap, and I'm like, ah. And my wife's like, what's going on? And I said, and I pulled the prosthetic out and signaled it to close. And it did this. Let's see, it did this. So I broke the middle finger in the up position. So I couldn't wear it to lunch with my in-laws, because that would have been very rude. But I got that fixed. I call J2 is my prostheticist, and I call him my mechanic. And that's what you see me holding right there. That's the early prototypes for the claw. So they were molding those fingers in a way that, how can I get the best grip but get the most room to grab stuff with? It's a real science what they do. And this is exactly the same thing. This was when you and I first talked about doing this. The reason that I said yes to talking about all this was because, not that I'm shy about it or anything, but this is the exact sort of stuff that guys and girls coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan have been going through with upper arm injury or upper amputations, upper body amputations, which is basically the arms. The burns, I've talked to a couple of vets, and their experience in the burn units was just like mine. In fact, I met a D-Day vet that was in there at the same time that I was, Joe Rockford, great guy. Once I got up and mobile and was able to walk around, half the time I'd be in his room visiting with him, which my wife just found hilarious. She's like, you'll find a vet wherever you go. So, but yeah, the burns, if they go to Brooks Army Medical Center or Bethesda, they're being treated for burns very similar to the way I was. The OT and the PT, same sort of exercises they put them through. I'm not a vet. I wasn't injured in combat. I'm nobody special, but it gave me new insight to what these folks go through. And there's, I don't know if you're able to see it anywhere, Ken, but there's a photograph of two guys displaying prosthetics.
Yeah, hold on. I think you're talking about this one here.
Yes. So that's the guy with the beard is Jay. He's my mechanic. Fabulous guy. After the earthquake in Haiti, he was going down regularly to Haiti, and Hanger was giving prosthetics to people who were injured and had amputations. Great company, great guy. But Jay actually turned out to be the mechanic for the other guy that's in the photo, whose name is Mike McNaughton. At one point, he was one of the board members of the Kid. Mike has, as you can see, a prosthetic leg, and he also lost parts of fingers on his one of his hands, very similar to my injury. He stepped on a landmine in Afghanistan and got injured that way. When I first met Mike, his first prosthetic leg, he would have to carry a laptop with him. And you would see him sit down in the lobby of the Kid, and he'd be there for an event or something. And he'd have this laptop on his lap, and he's got a USB going down, plugging into the foot. And I'm like, what are you doing? He said, well, the onboard computer is walking funny. So I have to plug it in, and it's dumping all of its data to the computer to crunch the numbers. And then the computer's going to send information back that's going to adjust the motors and the gyros and everything on it so that I walk more level and have an easier gait. I'm like, that's amazing. And this was around 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in there, long before my accident. And then when I started talking with him after I got injured, and we were comparing notes on prosthetics and everything, I asked him, I said, do you still have to carry that computer around with you, that laptop, to get it to adjust itself? He said, oh no, that was like 3 prosthetics ago. He said, the one that I have on now, it has its own onboard computer. It adjusts automatically. He said, it's come so far. And that, through him and through Jay, I was able to learn that lower body prosthetics, legs, the technology has been there for a long time, and they've just been pushing the envelope. But upper bodies like mine, the arms, they were still using, and you've seen them in these movies and TV shows, they were still using the crude kind of molded arm, and where the hand is, it has a hook that is also divided, and it clamps. So you can grab it and then twist it. You can twist the hand and all that. But the hook clamp was still in use when Afghanistan started. And I met several different people. If you've ever watched this movie, A Dolphin's Tale, that came out about a dolphin that was wounded with netting, and the tail rotted off, the tail fins. And so they built her a prosthetic Winter. Yes, Winter the dolphin. They built her a prosthetic tail with the tail fin and everything. And they made 2 movies about her, and she's since passed on. But I met the guy that was her prostheticist. He said whenever they would have specialty tours for kids or whatever coming back behind the scenes to her tank, she could tell, even if she couldn't see over the retaining wall for the pool, she could tell where the kids in wheelchairs were, and where anybody who had like a prosthetic leg she couldn't see, somehow she knew, and she would always focus on them. She would not leave their sides until they left. Amazing story. But I met these people and everything, and until Afghanistan started, they hadn't gotten past the 1950s, 1960s little old style clamp upper body prosthetic. And the guy that designed it, I met a guy that knew him when I was at Touch Bionics getting mine upgraded. And he said, have you ever noticed there's this little kind of ridge, a little cut in each of the clamps on the claw? And I said, I hadn't really noticed. He said, yeah. He said, and he went and grabbed one. And sure enough, when they're closed, there's this little small hole. And I said, what's that for? And he said, this dude that designed it was a smoker, and he had a prosthetic, just like Hanger, improved his prosthetic. This guy improved his upper body prosthetic, and he was a smoker, and the damn clamp kept crushing his cigarettes. And so he carved out a little hole where he could clamp down on a cigarette, not crush his cigarette, and he could still smoke with his prosthetic. He said his design, and this is a wire type thing, not electrical or anything. It's just wires and pulleys. You wear a harness, and the way you close it, you rotate your back and your shoulders, and it clamps down. And he said it was so popular when it first came out that they decided to patent it and mass market it to everybody. And that became the standard for decades. Even for kids, they downsized it, scaled it down. So if you see pictures of a little kid with one of those clamp type things, they copied it perfectly. So this little kid has a cigarette hole on his clamp so he can smoke. Not really smoking, but that's how slow the upper body stuff was. When mine came along, they were actually DARPA. It's an outgrowth of DARPA, the military think tank. The guys at DARPA were sitting around there watching Empire Strikes Back, and they get to the end of the movie, according to this guy, and they're fitting Luke Skywalker. Everything comes back to Star Wars, Shane. It really does. He's hitting Skywalker with his robotic hand, and this guy jumps up and pauses the movie, and everybody's like, "Whoa!" And he says, "This technology is within our grasp. Why are we not doing this?" And so that's where the genesis of like my prosthetic, and then this one that you see in this graphic that I did for our kid keynotes presentation, which Jay came to and presented at. That's called informally the Luke Skywalker hand, because just like Skywalker's thing in the movie there, it works off of thought. And it was in production, not production, it was in the experimental stage when mine came out. Mine was cutting edge for a couple of years until this thing started coming along. At that time, it was not just for the hand like mine is. It had to have pretty much the forearm gone. And if you had the little stump right here, then you could be fitted with one of these for the experimental purposes. There is a nerve cluster right about here. And they do a surgery and they put in a Bluetooth type attachment into the nerve cluster. And then you put the arm on, turn it on, and if I'm going to point just as fast as I'm pointing there, and the synapses fire off through the nervous system to go to my finger, if I'm wearing the prosthetic, then it travels down and the electrical impulse, the command, hits that nerve cluster, hits the Bluetooth signals off to the hand, and the finger points. It's faster than my prosthetic, and they're actually now out in production and people are beginning to use them, working off thoughts.
That's now I've heard that some people reject their prosthetics and they decide, you know what, I'm better off without it. And did that ever occur to you?
No. I, like Connor said, he's never seen me use it or anything, but from my vantage point, it's a tool, and I use it for what it works best for me for. And the more I visit, I'm reading the thing off Michael's comment. The more I use the prosthetic, and like if I left it on all day, all the time, all the work that Dawn and the PTs and OTs did on my fingers, my wrist, my arms would go away. My arm and everything would begin to lock up again. So I use it when I need it, and then I set it aside and I do everything else without it. It's hard to type with a prosthetic. I'm not at 150 words anymore a minute, but I've had people tell me, you type really fast for not having all your fingers.
And when it comes to the work you do on the kid, your museum ship work, you sent some pictures of you doing all kinds of stuff.
I almost went back in the hospital with that one.
with this one?
Yeah, that's a hog ring pneumatic gun. So I'm hog ringing the ropes together to make snaking for the railing, and doing it with 2 fingers versus a whole hand was a learning curve. And I was having to, twist a certain way to get it lined up and then pull the trigger. And I pulled the trigger at the wrong moment, and I hog ringed half of a ring into that little fleshy part underneath my thumb there. And I was hooked to the actual rope. I had to figure out how to get it out without just screaming. So,
I bring these pictures up, and here's another one, because Rob, Connor's dad, put this in the comments. He said, when it would have been easy after this accident of yours, when it would have been easy to walk away, you obviously kept doing what you were doing with the kid. Did you ever have any inclination of, or any thought that, you know what, screw this, I'm done with this? No more USS Kid, no more museum ships.
I never had that thought. And more than one person has come up and said, dude, you should be owning the ship. You should have sued. And I'm like, it's an accident. Accidents happen. And how can I sue when I'm the guy that was in charge of the gun? It was very gratifying. Our safety guy with our liaison that did the investigation with the state. He visited me at home while I was still recuperating and interviewed me about what went on. So I went through the whole spiel just like I did with you guys, but ad nauseum. He's asking questions and I'm elaborating and everything. And he wrapped it up and he said, "Okay, well, we're done." I'm like, well, you haven't really done much. And I expected a lot more. He said, "You've told me your story." He said, "That's all I needed to hear." He said, "I've already done my investigation. This is just kind of cursory. I'm just doing it to do it because I wanted to come hang out with you for a little while." I'm like, "Okay." He said, "I've interviewed every person that you've trained to be in that gun and every person that has operated that gun that's on the current staff." He said, "Every single one of them, I put in the gun. I walked them through firing the gun. I walked them through backing it out. I walked them through what ifs to make sure that they understood what they were doing and they weren't just rote repeating what you were saying." He said, "You trained them well. They all know it." He said, "In fact, one guy, Josh, I had him going back and forth, where he was getting mad at me. But I wanted to make sure he understood what he was saying and why he was doing what he did." And he said, "Do you know the nickname that they have for you?" And I'm like, "They have a nickname for me?" That's never a good sign, right? And he said, "Yeah." He said, "They call you the gun Nazi because you won't let anybody in the gun unless you feel 100% certain that they're going to do it right and not get anybody killed." And he said, they say that you don't dance around it. If I pick you for the gun, you could potentially be killed." He said, "And so they mention when you train them." He said, "And you've got a good crew. They know their stuff." And he said, "Everything you just told me lined up perfectly with what I've already heard from about 4 or 5 different other people." So that was a really good, like I said, our crew responding, when there was a crisis, and then these guys knowing their stuff and being grilled about it, and him walking away going, "I don't even really need to interview you because I already know what you did, and it was an accident." So that was gratifying.
So this is Tim Nesmith, superintendent of the USS Kidd, telling us about his accidental explosion 12 years ago, firing Mount 52. And Shane, Connor, John, any other questions for Tim?
Did we actually answer the question? Did you guys ever actually did you quit shooting the guns after that?
That's a good question.
I got sidetracked. No, I did not answer that. Thank you, Con. No, we did not stop shooting because of that. In fact, they shot while I was recuperating. They shot for the 4th of July. And then the very next year, they shot for the 4th of July again. And we had an administration change at the end of 2013. And the new director and some of our new board members looked at it and they said, we had an accident. Everything turned out okay with that, except for Tim losing his fingers. But we're shooting 5-inch guns and all this powder, and there could have been a fire that day, but there wasn't. It didn't set anything on fire inside, fortunately. We have a rare World War II destroyer. There's only 4 left in the world. She's the only one in a World War II configuration. We could seriously mess up our ship doing this sort of stuff. We could seriously mess up more staff if there's another accident. And on the 4th of July, we're bringing pyrotechnics people in, and they are setting off explosives in the river right next to the ship, blowing big geysers of water up in the air, making simulated bomb blast. And she started out with 3/8 of an inch steel, and now she's at that point 70-something years old. You don't set off cherry bombs next to your grandmother in her armchair. So why would you do it to a thin-skinned ship with big explosives? On top of that, we didn't really make any money for it. So, $20 a shot is nothing compared to the damage that we can cause. So they evaluated it and they decided we're just going to shut this down because we don't really get anything out of it. You know, it's cool, but for what damage we could do, it's not worth it. So we stopped doing it. And ironically, you may have met Rich McKelney at Historic Naval Ships in New York. He was there, if I remember correctly. Rich, when I saw him in 2014 at Norfolk, when I was choking Rizzuto with the prosthetic, Rich did a presentation on taking two 40mm guns and taking good parts from two scrapped up 40s and making a working 40mm for Pampanito. And a lot of people were really writing him about, you need to make that fire. You need to, hook it up to propane. You need to use black powder, this, that. And he had developed a presentation that he was giving at HINSA and at a couple other places. And when I showed up, he grabbed me real quick. He said, I need to have lunch with you. And so he got me to the side. We had lunch and he told me about what he did. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. He said, people are writing me about firing this. He said, and my presentation is going to include why I don't fire the gun. He said, and you're in it, but I want to make sure you know what I'm talking about. So I want to make sure it doesn't offend you. And I'm like, you're not going to offend me, Rich. You're a friend, but go ahead. And basically, he used me as an example. He said, Rizzuto taught you how to fire that gun, and your other guys that were there, the vets, taught you how to fire that gun, 20 years ago. He said, and you've been doing it ever since. So you're intimately familiar with that gun. You've done this dozens, if not hundreds of times. He said, everybody always says, when I say, I don't want to mess with black powder, I don't want to mess with propane, somebody can get hurt. They go, oh, but those are yahoos that get hurt. He said, Tim is not a yahoo. Tim has studied this gun. He's trained on this gun. He's operated the gun, and he still got hurt. He put in new safety measures that weren't there before to make it safer, and he still got hurt. He said there can always be an accident. And so Rich's philosophy kind of rubbed off on our board as well, of there can always be an accident. And we don't want to lose people, but we don't want to lose the ship either. And so that's why they scaled it back and just said, we're not going to do it anymore. The last time the guns fired were for Greyhound, but they didn't fire them the way we fired them with the old way of putting a blank charge in to the breech and firing it off that way. They put a sleeve down into the barrel, and then they would lower the barrel, slide their packet of explosives into there with wiring out, raise the barrel back up, call action, here it goes, and then they just press a little electrical impulse and bam, and then they would cut and reload. They didn't have to fire one behind the other for the camera because they could splice that together. But we still keep the guns mobile, being able to train and elevate. We still take and exercise the breaches. If you go on Facebook, you can see me with a bunch of Latter-day Saints missionaries. It's hard for me to crank because I don't have as good of grip on one hand anymore. So I get the young, and I'm not as young as they used to be. So I get the young kids to do it, and they get a kick out of it. I take pictures of them, and they're like, I cranked a big gun around, yay. And so we keep it mobile. My hope is when we get back from dry dock, we'll be able to set up some specialty tours and steal from USS North Carolina and do a weaponry tour and show people how the gun worked, but without actually shooting the gun.
Well, Paul just commented here. Fire with oxygen, acetane, sure,
acetylene.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard it. It sounds realistic.
When I was there, I was fortunate enough to be there. They set it up for me, and yeah, it's pretty cool what they do on the USS Cod. But to your point, anything.
The Doofus Award.
Anything can go wrong. I suppose, as careful as you are, and I can attest, Paul and his crew, they were very careful. But so how do you feel about you personally? How do you feel about not firing the guns anymore?
I'll admit I miss it. one of the TV stations was asking me about a year afterwards, would I go back in the gun? I'm like, the last 4th of July that we did, legally, I wasn't allowed to go in the gun because like I said, we slipped through the cracks with all the alphabet agencies. After 9/11, all the stuff had changed regulation wise around black powder and handling of black powder. So we didn't have any of the certifications that are required now for handling black powder. So we got, for those 2 4th of Julys, we got the Washington Artillery, which is a reenactment group to come up. Great guys, very professional, very safe. But they work with smoothbores, and they were actually a little nervous with that mobile breach popping up. They were pushing the powder casings in with a broom handle, and I'm like, "You're gonna set it off early, dude." That was another thing. Finding and keeping a trained crew certified when most of our staff rotates every 2 years, our part-time staff. That was a deterrent too, because that's just, you're bleeding money there. But I actually got into the gun and helped them actually get a misfire out of the chamber after it had sat there for a couple hours and hadn't gone off. So I've been in the gun. I have no problems going back into the gun. And I told the news station, I said, I have more danger driving the 15 minutes from my house to the kid on the interstate every morning and going home every evening than I do getting in that gun. And I stand by that assessment. There's people that are crazy on the highways.
So, I mean, so you do miss it then?
I miss it a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I understand the reasoning behind it, and I agree with it. She is old, and she's not one of a kind. She's one of 4, but she's the only one that can go back as far as she has for World War II without excessive cost. And for us to play Russian roulette with a fire or an explosion, we could have seriously hurt the ship that day, not just me.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have it prepared, but I was able to. This is, let's see. So this is me when I was on the COD, and I think this is a 3-inch that they have set up to fire with propane. And like Paul said, it's just as loud. It's pretty impressive. So it was a thrill to see. But then, as you said a few moments ago, I can totally appreciate how, it's an old ship, and you don't. Oh, it is a 5-inch. Okay, it's an old ship. And
there's Rich. Hello, Rich. Hello, Paul.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. All right, you mentioned it a few moments ago. The kids going into dry dock.
Yes.
How is that going?
We are waiting for water. Everybody needs to turn on their water faucets and leave them running in between the Appalachians and the Rockies and south of Connor, so that it'll all go into the river system and float us. But we're getting to the rainy season. I understand. I heard Connor say before we started up that there's no snow left up there where he's at.
Very little.
Very little. So hopefully the rainy season will kick in the plains and in the Midwest, and we'll get enough water to get out. But we're looking at plan Bs and Cs to, there you go, Lego, dump a whole bunch of it. I want it. So that we can float her out. If we get close, we're looking at ways to get her a little bit more. I pulled out a bunch of old Cold War stuff out of the magazine yesterday, and we're emptying stuff out to make her lighter.
So you guys are literally ready to go if the water level was cooperating.
We're in the process of getting ready to go. There's still some stuff that we've got to do, but
okay.
We're working with the Coast Guard. We're working with the towing company. We're working with the shipyard. We've got a salvage company involved that can help us get those few extra feet up if we don't get the height that we need.
A couple of weeks ago on the Buffalo Naval Parks YouTube channel, you and Shane were talking about how you guys were taking on water. You were dealing with pumps and that type of thing. What's the latest there?
Well, that was the day that I had an eighth hole open up for me, but still in the same 5 spaces, so we haven't spread. So as of right now, the water is down and she's sitting in the cradle, so we don't have as much intake at the moment. So everything is still stable. Knock on wood. I don't want to say it too loudly and jinx myself, but we're we're waiting for the water to come and raise us up, and then we're going to do some temporary repairs with some divers, kind of like what Shane has already had to deal with Sullivan's. With the was that splash zone you guys were using, Shane?
Well, is that the actual? You're talking the where on the ship or
The epoxy that they were putting over the.
I don't know the name of the epoxy. I'm sorry, I wasn't. I wasn't involved in the ordering of it or anything like that. But yeah, it's a 2-part epoxy. You know, it's like tar, and you spread it on. So
it solidifies up. It's hard as rock afterwards. Yeah. So we're gonna have divers get on the outside because we put some on the inside, but the problem with the touch points is when she comes down and hammers, it just lifts that epoxy seal right up off the metal. So we got to do it on the outside too, and not sit back down in the cradle.
If anyone watching, it was pretty interesting to watch the interview Shane did with you. Check out Buffalo Naval Park's YouTube channel. Search for Buffalo Naval Park, and it was Shane. That was about a month ago, right? No. That was just 2 weeks ago.
yeah, it was late February.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, you shouldn't have any problem finding it. It was interesting. Let's see. What anything else from the USS Kidd, or is that literally what's going on? You guys are trying to make the ship lighter and
that's literally what's going on. We will have on April 11th our annual, unless that's the day that all the water comes up all at once and we got to go. But we will take 5 minutes and we will read the names of our 38 fallen crewmen and our Japanese pilot. We do an annual memorial service. We really have to because they've been doing this memorial service since 1946, continuously somewhere in the world, either on board the Kidd when she was still in service or at a little church in Massachusetts, the crew members, or here in Baton Rouge. When we filmed Greyhound, we told them, we worked it in the contract, April 11th, we need an hour and a half. And you got to stop filming at 1:55 and we got to do our service. And they were very gracious about it and attended. And Tom Hanks took and participated and threw a carnation in the water for one of the sailors. So we will never, even during the pandemic, nobody was around, but 2 of our staff members were out there. One of them was reading the names, one of them was throwing carnations, and the third one was filming. And I was stuck at home in quarantine. So, but we will always do that ceremony for those guys.
This comment just popped up. Roger asks if you let anyone in the radio room. Do you have any of the old equipment on there?
Yeah, we've got the old equipment. Now none of it works. We have some code running just from on a flash drive and an amplifier. But if you call ahead and schedule that, then we're able to do it. But if you just show up and say, I want to go in, we got a small staff and we can't always guarantee that we'll have somebody that can do it. But calling ahead helps us schedule. So definitely do that.
Now I can't remember.
Well,
Shane or John, I can't remember if it was the Slater or the Sullivans. You guys have operational radio equipment, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great, guys. Thanks.
Is it the original stuff, John, or is it the modern ham radio stuff?
I'm sorry?
Is it the original World War II equipment that's working, or is it the ham radio stuff?
Yeah, we have both, and we can do Morse code as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
we have ham radio that operates on board, but they have actually disassembled the station and taken it off while we're going to dry dock. So,
Shane, what were you saying?
Yeah, and for the Buffalo Naval Park, I mean, we've got radio rooms everywhere because of our 3 vessels. So we've got two on the Sullivans, 1 on Croker, and my God, huge Radio Central on all that equipment's been stripped though. Radio 2, Radio 5. So we have a lot of radio spaces on USS Little Rock, but yeah, nothing works other than the ham radio guys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. Tim Nesmith, Superintendent, USS Kid. For those of you that want to check out the Kids YouTube channel, simply search for USS Kid Veterans Museum or check out their website, usskid.com. And if you get the opportunity to support them, that's the place to go if they wanted to support the kids' effort to go into dry dock, make a donation, that type of thing. Go to usskid.com, correct?
Yes, we will take every dead president you want to throw at us.
Excellent. And Connor pulled up the website there. Make sure that's Kid with 2 Ds.
Correct.
Check out.
Out of curiosity, does your online gift shop ship to Canada?
I don't know if they'll ship to Canada. Canada might have a better chance than overseas. I know overseas we don't do it, but I can't answer about Canada.
All right, just asking. It's 50-50 depending on the ship.
Shoot me a message tonight or tomorrow, and I will ask for you when I get back to work tomorrow.
Sure thing.
Well, Tim, thanks for sharing your story. It's something I was always curious about.
I don't normally talk in a public forum about it, because I'm nobody special. Like I said, I was the least injured person on the burn unit. But when you said something at the January episode for Museum Ship Mafia, and I texted you afterwards, I had told you the accident is just the smallest part of the story. The burn unit, the people in it, the PTs and OTs and the prostheticists and everything, those guys and girls, just for me to get the chance to come and talk about them and all that they did. Frank Thompson, like I said, from Naval History and Heritage Command, was injured with his back. He was going through back surgery recuperation. I was recuperating at the same time. He was binge watching the $6 Million Man at the time. And he kept joking. He said, "They've made you and me better, stronger, faster." And those people are the people that do that on a day-to-day basis for more people than just me. So I am eternally grateful to those folks.
Well, it was, the show, the video podcast called Museum Ship Mafia, and we kind of branched off into different subjects, sometimes shipwrecks and everything. But hey, when it comes to museum ships, this is a story that I think everyone needs to hear. I've always been curious about it, and I don't think I would bet that a lot of people that do tune into the video podcast and have seen you on here before, I'd be willing to bet half of them don't know that kind of a sacrifice that you made. That you're missing fingers, the explosion, that type of thing. So yeah, I wanted to bring it up, and I'm glad you said yes. So yeah. Thanks.
And one thing I forgot to touch on, if I can just take a moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the questions that I always get is phantom pains. And I learned the most amazing thing about phantom pains from my first PT in the burn unit. He worked with some units in Afghanistan, and I don't have them. I have what you would call phantom sensations. They're not painful at all. It's just this weird feeling, like I will suddenly feel like an itching where my finger used to be. And I can't remember his name now. It's been too long. But what he taught me was the reason I don't have phantom pains, but I have phantom sensations, is because of the way that I was injured. That thing hit my hand, and just like Legos, my fingers went boom, boom, boom. They're off, and they're not hanging. They're not connected. And he said, the guys and girls that are injured in the field, when they have, let's say, a grenade goes off or something, and their hand is damaged but still connected, and then later at the hospital, the doctor's like, we can't save it, we have to amputate it, and then they take it off. That entire time between being injured and the amputation, the damaged digits or the damaged limb, if it's a whole limb, is sending signals back to the brain. And he said, think of your brain as a tape recorder. and it's just recording all of these signals of ouch, 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 ouch. He said, when you got them knocked off immediately, he said the last thing that they felt was what you had been doing before the accident, because it happened too fast for you to, for me to feel any pain of it coming off. So I had 3 distinct feelings in the hospital, and for months and months after it, I don't really feel them anymore, very rarely. One of them was the fingers feeling like they were pressed down, like they were clamped together. And remember, I talked about the cell phone being the backup?
Oh, yeah.
Knowing when to fire. I would pull that out. I stopped wearing watches once I got my cell phone because I could just flip it open. There's the time, flip it closed. So, if we're sitting there waiting, did we miss the call? I reach into my pocket, pull the phone out, and in reaching into my pocket, my fingers are compressing to get to the phone. And he said, that's what that feeling is. One of the other feelings was feeling like I was gripping a bar as tight as I could. And he said what that was me grabbing hold of the bar and pulling myself up into the gun, coming up that ladder. And that was that feeling. And I forget what the third sensation was. It's been so long since I had it, I don't remember it. But that is the difference between phantom pains and phantom sensations, because they're feeling all that pain coming regularly. And some of my Vietnam vet volunteers that are gone now, but they were talking to me afterwards. They were asking me the same thing. You got pains? I'm like, no. You? Like, oh, yeah. I'm like, so your amputation happened later at the hospital? Oh, yeah. I'm like, okay. So it all makes sense. And keep in mind when you hear a vet talking about phantom pains, that's what happened to them. They suffered with that injury before the amputation came.
Let's see. Before we move on to the Buffalo Naval Park, Slater and Alexander Henry, you guys got any last minute questions for Tim? Tim, we aren't going to kick you off.
No, I'm good.
But any last minute questions for Tim?
No, thanks
All
for
right.
sharing the story. I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even we didn't know the whole extent of the story. So yeah, thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a Paul Harvey moment. And now the rest of the story.
All right, moving on to the Buffalo Naval Park. Shane, I don't know if you're going to be able to top the USS Kidd and Tim's experience, but what do you guys got going on at the Buffalo Naval Park?
Oh, sure. Well, it's controlled chaos right now because we open in about 10 days, and still working on a lot of last minute stuff. So, like tomorrow we have St. Patrick's Day celebration, and we are excited to say that John Sullivan's coming. So that's the first time this will be the first time that I've met him. And so he's the brother of Kelly. So Albert is also his grandfather. So he's the son of Jimmy Sullivan. And so that's exciting. This will be the first time, I think, in a long time that John Sullivan has been here. And we're going to ask him to say a few words at our dinner. We have the eclipse coming here. That's a big event. We're in the path of totality. So we are planning like a day pass for people to watch the eclipse on board the Little Rock, which there's plenty of space. So we've been doing a lot of planning for that. And, they're expecting, 700,000 people in the Buffalo area. So there's going to be a lot of activity, and we want to be able to capture, some of that, some of those individuals coming to Buffalo and Western New York. Just wrapped up 29 and 29. 13 days ago. Really? It's already, oh my God.
Yeah. Are you sick of making videos?
No, but I just can't believe it was 13 days ago. Things are going by very quickly. So, yeah, and that was great. It's great to talk to people every night, things like that. So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, we're just ramping up. Our season opens March 23rd. We'll be open 5 days a week until March 1st or May 1st. Right. So we're open Wednesday through Sunday until May 1st. And then we open up fully 7 days a week until Thanksgiving, roughly. So we're looking forward to it being a very good year. It's the 80th anniversary of the Croaker. So we'll be doing a celebration for her. And then next year is the 80th anniversary of Little Rock. So yeah, boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see. Moving on to the Slater. John, what's up?
Similar. We're getting ready for the opening day, April 3rd. So we got a little longer than Shane. We're wrapping up a lot of our maintenance and restoration projects inside the ship right now, and just trying to get everything back together. A lot of cleaning. CIC and chart room is going to get put back together in the next couple of weeks. We have decided to just do a patch job, more or less, in CIC and chart room until we can raise money to do a more professional repair job. Hopefully that will be next winter. Who knows? But yeah, we're just plugging away.
To learn more about the USS Slater in Albany, check out their Facebook page. That's where I've been seeing a lot of your stuff lately. But they also have the YouTube channel. Search for USS Slater in the search bar or ussslater.org. Thank you, Connor.
Hey, John, I've got a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, how did Shanna end up? Do you want to? Can you share a little quick update with Shanna?
Yeah, we've talked about it on our social media and whatnot. Yeah, Shanna had her baby.
Good. It's probably been a while, actually, right?
Yeah, I should know the date, shouldn't I? He's just over a month old. So yeah, she'll hopefully be back sometime in May.
Great.
Tim, do you have kids?
I have a stepson. I bought used.
Okay.
His name's Griffin. He's 24. No, I take it back. He just turned 25.
So you're the closest out of this group of 5. You're the closest to having kids because, John, you don't have kids.
No, and I don't want them.
Connor does not have kids. And I don't believe Shane has kids.
I don't know, man. That night in Madrid about 20 years ago, I think that's going to come back to haunt me.
Yeah, I don't have kids. So Tim's the only one. All right.
And dogs.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else for the Slater, John?
As always, I encourage you to follow us on Facebook. We post every single night. Sign up for a newsletter every month. We send out a newsletter. It's free. You can also sign up for a quarterly newsletter. We mail that to you. Next one will go out end of March, early April. That's for members. But membership is cheap. Are the museum ships your kids? Yeah.
No, they're
a very old kid.
I'm saying no, they're our girlfriends.
Oh.
My wife calls kid my mistress.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. Let's see. Yeah, ussslater.org is the website. Check out their Facebook. I didn't realize you guys posted every night, but I do know that you post
every
a lot.
Every single day. Yep.
And that's good to know. Let's see. Moving on to Connor Kilgore, Transportation Museum of Thunder Bay, the Canadian Coast Guard icebreaker, Alexander Henry. What's going on with you guys?
I brought a list.
You brought a list?
Yeah. So obviously winter is coming to an end much sooner than normal. But that doesn't mean we're not busy. One of the big things we're working on right now is we're engaged in discussions with the City of Thunder Bay as they seek to develop the Pool 6 area. Pool 6 is where we're docked currently. And when I say Pool 6, it's the name of the old grain elevator that used to be where the ship is now. Man, I need a new camera.
Sorry. All right, fine.
Yeah. I actually just ordered one while we were doing all this. Yeah, so hopefully we'll see that next time. And that will include things like a possible expansion of our property in the future. That's something we'd really like, and we're also working on some lease agreements as well. the City of Thunder Bay is currently doing a survey on their website. So if there are any Thunder Bay locals in the audience who wish to state their opinion on what they think the Pool 6 site should be best used for, feel free to put your opinions in the comments there.
Is that on the tmtb.ca site?
You can just look up the City of Thunder Bay website, and it's there.
Okay.
It should be noted as well, the TMTB website is currently down for maintenance. It will be back online within the next month, so I've been told. Interesting thing of note, Shane, you will like this, is our team that's currently working on this new website took a look at other museum ships to see examples of websites, and apparently they liked your website at Buffalo the best.
Wow.
And,
I've never heard that before. Okay, thank you. All right, I'll pass that along to our I'll pass that along to our staff.
Yeah, and if our website comes online and it looks identical, we know who to blame. So
thank you for saying.
Yeah, so other things we're doing is we are working with other museums and nonprofit organizations, hoping to do more collaborative projects. These are other groups that focus on other aspects of transportation and just the history of our region. So we'll hopefully have things to announce pretty soon on that front, but I can't say much there. And another thing, we had our AGM, which our annual general meeting, where we accepted 4 new members to our board, and most notably, at least in my area, is a marine archaeologist named Chris McAvoy, who works at Lakehead University, and he is coming onto our team to help reorganize our collections. So welcome, Chris, and the chance you're watching, and I'm looking forward to working with you this season. And lastly, last big thing, well, actually, no, one other thing. As a result of the AGM, we've appeared on our local news channels more often than normal, both in written and in television media, although our online media didn't catch up. And then lastly, we are doing the preliminary work for Coast Guard Day, which is our annual celebration to celebrate the Canadian Coast Guard as well as the maritime history of our area. Our rough ETA is July 20th, and we hope to work with both our local naval station, HMCS Griffin, as well as we are, through them, extending an invitation to the United States Coast Guard to also attend as well. So more information on that when the time comes, and you're all invited if you feel like taking a long road trip.
Well, that was a hell of a list.
Yeah. What's happened in the last month?
I mean, John, Shane, Tim, how come you guys don't have a list like that?
I'm going to have to prepare one. You know, Connor's, he's raising the bar. Connor's raising the bar. So I'm going to have to get out my list, you know?
Mm-hmm. So,
one thing I have been doing that I've been really fascinated with is I've indexed all of the building programs throughout World War II. So now I'm locating where our ships fell within what program. So I plan on sharing that with especially the Kid, Cass and Young, Slater, Cod, you know, just like those regional ones that we deal with in a great way. Because how many times, you know, do you get asked, building program from the Congress appropriations did you come from, right? I mean, how many times do we get that question all the time, right? So I'm happy that I'll share that information with you guys. Yeah,
that sounds great. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed that video you did where you went to that island where they built a bunch of the like LSIs. Yeah. What are they called?
LCTs.
LCIs.
I saw that video where you're trying to, with, you know, old photos, or show like where they would have launched, you know, how you were kind of, you know, suspecting it was going in. Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good video too. I like that one.
Thank you. The landing craft tanks, the LCTs.
Yeah. We do have one question. How many YouTube channels is being broadcast to? This is being broadcast to 4, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Let's see. So the USS Kids YouTube channel, since we've got Tim on here, he was able to connect that. The Buffalo Naval Park, the USS Slater, and my channel, History X.
Yeah.
So.
And I also like to point out the same guy, Legacy. He lives in Kingston, where the Henry used to be. So I'm glad that you're able to join us tonight, and I'm glad you're able to get a bit of a catch up on what's been happening here in Thunder Bay. Anyone from Kingston is more than welcome to come up and visit the Henry anytime.
When's opening day?
Our opening day right now is a little later. We're looking at the May long weekend or just after it. So that would be about the 23rd or 24th of May. But with the weather the way it is, who knows?
Got it. Anything else you guys want to add? If not, I want to say, Tim, one more time, thanks for sharing your story with us tonight.
Hey,
let's give him a hand, everybody. Let's give him a
hand. And if there's a lot of you that are tuning in late, or you aren't familiar with how this all started out, replay the video and you're going to hear a pretty interesting story. Tim's accidental explosion aboard the USS Kidd 12 years ago. Man,
I have an
definitely check it
explosive
out.
personality.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
I have an explosive personality.
All right, enough of the jokes. You guys are the worst. Since there isn't anything else, I'm going to say thanks to everyone on behalf of John, Connor, Shane, and Tim Nesmith from the USS Kidd. My name is Ken Stano with YouTube channel History X, and thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.